Welcome into the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Good show today, folks. I got the privilege of seeing a really, really good movie this past weekend. We're going to dive into it here in just a second with our guest, Darcy Weir. Actually, I saw two movies, and I'm going to tell you why I compared and contrast. And it's an interesting experiment in kind of the paranormal here. I watched our guest Darcy Weir's movie first, called The Psychic Phenomenon. And Darcy has a line at the very end of the movie. And he knows what the line is. It basically challenges everyone at the end of the movie and says, if this isn't, I'm going to paraphrase here. I don't remember the exact line, but basically, if this evidence isn't enough for you, pretty much that type of line. If this evidence isn't enough to convince you, type deal. So then he's going to laugh, I bet, when I tell him this. The next movie that loads up in my queue as kind of kismet is James Randi's An Honest Liar. So I went, you know what? Why not? So I watched it, right? And it's a kind of an exercise in irony. So I sat and I watched it. And I thought, we had Randy on the program a couple of times. And as I'm sitting and watching it, I'm thinking to myself, man, you want to talk about two different exercises in the paranormal, right? You talk about psychic phenomena, you talk about remote viewing, you talk about contact with aliens, you talk about disclosure, you talk about programs that were run by our government, you talk about the ultimate in belief. And then you talk about a man who was the ultimate cynic, who said that this stuff didn't exist. It was woo-woo. It was flim-flam. It was people trying to scam other people. And he spent his entire life trying to shoot it down. And then I wondered to myself, I sat there, arms crossed, after it was all done. I sat there in silence thinking, I wonder what happened when Randy crossed that veil, if he did. Did he sit after his death? Did he sit there as an atheist? Maybe sat in his own dark mire in the afterlife? Or did a great white light come and grab James Randi and say, you know what? All's forgiven. And there is some great magic at the end here, and why don't you come aboard? Or did an alien come by and just say, you know what, let's show you what's on this other side here. And he finally dropped the facade of being this great cynic. Who knows? But it's an interesting thought. Let me tell you about our guest and bring him in. I just found it incredibly funny that this whole thing happened. And immediately after taking in Darcy's amazing movie, I got hit with this other side, and I don't know, it was almost like the universe itself. It was almost like Amazon Prime Prime Video wanted to throw in a media challenge to Darcy's challenge and say, well, really? Okay, let's try and balance it out a little bit, and we'll see which one wins in your mind. Obviously, Randy didn't exactly win in my mind, but it was an interesting story. Randy's story is an interesting story, that's for sure. Let me tell you a little bit about Darcy before we bring him in here. Darcy himself is quite the interesting person, an interesting filmmaker at that. Darcy Weir is a documentary filmmaker who, over the past 2 decades, has explored some of the most intriguing and thought-provoking subjects of our time, including UFOs, cryptids, and Bitcoin, with more than 15 feature-length documentaries available on Amazon Prime, Tubi, and Apple. His work continues to shed new light on these mysteries and make them more accessible to the general public. His latest movie is available, as you've heard, on Amazon Prime and Prime Video. It's called The Psychic Phenomenon, and it's available either to rent or buy. And I'll tell you, folks, you're going to want to buy it by the time you watch it. It's a great movie. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome into Darkness Radio, Darcy Weir. Hi, Darcy.
Hey, Tim. Good to see you. Thanks for having me back on. It's good to chat about this wild stuff.
Yeah, it's wild indeed. In this movie, you got Thomas Jane, you got Tracy Dolan, Russell Targ, Paul Smith, Joe McMoneagle. Boy, you've got a list of heavy hitters here, and boy, we get into the weeds here about things like remote viewing and talking about contacting alien civilizations and the whole psychic phenomena of reaching out there. And I know we're getting into broad topics, but we're going to narrow here, and we're going to talk about specifics here in a second. I want to ask you off the bat here, before we actually get into the specifics and minutia of this whole thing, because you play the objective interviewer of this whole deal, and you don't get into specifics about your experience at all with any of this. But have you actually tried remote viewing?
I have not. And it's something I'll probably document in the future. I plan to join a remote viewing school and practice controlled remote viewing, which is one of the major psychic methods that we show in the documentary.
You know, there's, I don't remember who exactly in the movie says it, but remote viewing is much like, it's much like someone who would play an instrument. Some people are really good at it. Some people, not so much. But was it Tracy who said it? It might have been.
Tracy Dolan?
Tracy Dolan, yeah. I think, I'm trying to remember. Well, someone in the movie, I don't remember if it was Joe or Tracy, said, some people may have an affinity for it. Some people may not so much, but we all have it, right?
Right. I think even Ed May kind of discusses it in a segment that there's certain people that are just more gifted with this ability. And, you can go and train to do it. You can go to a remote viewing class in school and practice. But his findings scientifically, going back to the Stargate, as well as whatever is going on now with remote viewers testing, is that you can only ever learn up to your natural ability. So, if you were highly psychic before and then you learn the methodology of remote viewing, which is, it's like a controlled study, you can become really good at remote viewing with that psychic ability. But if you're not naturally very psychic, you can learn remote viewing, but maybe not get a very high quality result at the end of it. So, I mean, I'm open to it. I'd love to try it myself, but I got a newborn baby and then I'm working on other documentary projects. So we'll see when I can do that.
There's a lot going on there. I understand. Now, I want to ask you this, because there is an inferred danger to this, at least in the movie. And remote viewers have said there's a little bit of an inferred danger to it. Did they so much as come out and say what the inferred danger is?
Well, yeah, I think Ingo Swann's quite famous about, talking about his sort of stalking of possible non-human intelligence after his experience on the moon, when he remote viewed a target there and he saw green men on the dark side of the moon, like mining something. That's the way he described it. He was warded off. He was never allowed to go back there. And he felt kind of what people describe as like the hitchhiker effect that's happened at Skinwalker for certain people that have visited the ranch. Something follows them. And there's other remote viewers. There's a guy named Direct Perception that is on X, who's also named Russ. And he was a remote viewer. And he encourages people not to do it because he's worried about what they might tap into that they can't untap from, they can't disconnect from. So I think I'm open to speculating on it. It's very interesting, and if it's real, pretty creepy in my opinion.
There's something in the movie too that Tracy points out when they were given a target to tap into. She taps into the actual, into a woman that they're given a target, a moving target to tap into.
Yes.
And she taps into this woman, and she sees the woman as this woman is looking into her compact. And she sees this woman looking into the compact through her own eye. And at that point, Tracy, without giving away too much in the movie, she says, at that point, she realizes we're all connected in one way or another. Now, I have to ask you this question, Darcy, because it hits me right between the eyes as I'm watching this. If all of us learned how to develop this ability, would we treat each other different, do you think?
Oh, yeah. I think there'd be a lot less privacy too, as it was used as a military spying tool or intelligence spying tool for a long time. But I think the idea that we're all connected is not an illusion. I think the fact that there might be sort of this non-local information field that's out there, and sometimes our minds taps into it, and sometimes that field allows us to connect to somebody else's consciousness and somebody else's view. That's what happened in Tracy Dolan's perspective when she did a remote viewing exercise. So I think this is something that's underreported for sure. And the powers that be probably just don't want us to know. They want us to think that we're, everything's a secret and it can stay a secret forever, but apparently not.
Where do you feel the 6 degrees of separation lies between simple intuition of, like, say, knowing my cat's in the room and sitting over in the corner, and remote viewing and being able to see a target that's physically across the world, like, say, maybe sitting in the corner in Russia at a table at a cafe?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I do believe that our brains, are trained and capable of pattern recognition, right? We're very good at recognizing things quickly, understanding the objects we're looking at in front of us, all that sort of thing. So, when somebody asks you a question and you guess the answer, that's a good example of like pattern recognition and getting the answer right, because you're like, oh, maybe it's this. Okay, I got it right. You're using your mind to think of something that you can recognize, right? But when somebody hands you, like in controlled remote viewing, there's 6 stages. There's a monitor. There's somebody who's basically guiding and observing the results of the test. It's more scientific in terms of a psychic exercise. And when they give that envelope to the person who's actually targeting something psychically with their mind's eye, the monitor gives the envelope. They don't know what's in it, but they're often given coordinates, right? Maybe somewhere in the world. And in the case of, people like Pat Price, they were so highly psychic, it went beyond pattern recognition. It definitely proved to be something that's unrecognized by mainstream science, right? So, for example, Russ Targ famously explains the situation where the CIA gave them a target to look into. And that target was supposed to be a log cabin in the woods somewhere. But when Pat Price looked at it, he saw a secret NSA underground base. And when he went into that place underground, he saw things like a safe. And he was asked to look inside the safe. And he could look inside of a safe and he could read the words and letters that were on pieces of paper locked inside of a safe. So that's incredible. And when they got the results from that test, the CIA, they became very mum after that, and they stopped talking about the target and didn't disclose any other information that was being requested by Russell Targ and his people, because they were surprised that this is what Pat saw. So to me, that's the major difference between regular pattern recognition and understanding of something like your cat in the next door room and a, very psychic event that takes place when practicing remote viewing.
What I found interesting about the clarity of what's being seen, and it really seems like it is a matter of how many times you do it. It's repetition. It's much like whether it be a ballerina who's practicing over and over again to refine their skills, a football player who's out there practicing day after day after day to see if they can toe tap the sideline and catch a ball and be able to stay in bounds, whatever it is. It seems like the more they refine their gift, the easier it is for the images to come up and the clearer it is for the images to come to them. Is that your understanding? Like the first time you reach out, maybe the pictures aren't so clear. Maybe it's a little veiled. It's harder to see what it is they're reaching out for. And as they delve in more and more and more, the clearer those images become, the more detail they get. Am I getting this about right?
Yeah, I think the point is with remote viewing is to take pieces. It's essentially building a puzzle with your mind. And so, there's many different pieces. And when you first look out, you're grabbing a gestalt, like a feeling, an atmosphere, and then you start looking at things visually, what kind of objects you see, what kind of mood and environment. Is there water? Is there, lots of light? Is it dark, bright, that type of stuff? And you're getting all these pieces to make up a bigger picture. People that are highly psychic obviously can illustrate cranes and all kinds of very high detail objects that they're seeing. And Ingo Swann was one of these people. Paul H. Smith, who's featured in the documentary, another one of these people that was capable of doing that type of thing. And he's still alive today. But for somebody like me, maybe Chris Ramsey or whoever else has practiced this, they get like little objects, little shapes, like a triangle, a square, a circle, wavy lines. Like I don't think I would give like a really accurate illustration of what I was targeted to see. But there are people that can do that. And for a lot of people, it's getting pieces at a time to tell an overall picture. And you'll often see they're either very far off from what the final object was that's in the envelope, or they're like bang on, like really close. There's a guy that is on X.com, formerly Twitter. He goes by Astral, and he does like remote viewing exercises, releases like a photo of an envelope, target number, and opens it up to the world online for people to remote view and guess what's in there, what the image is. And some people come really, really close. So, how does that happen? I think it's not sheer luck.
Yeah. I tell you, remote viewing intrigues me, although it also scares me. It's one of those things that I think I'm in your camp. Once you open up that door, you can't close it again. Once you break that jar, you can't unbreak it, right? It's you've opened that door, you've blown it off the hinges. You can't screw the hinges back on. It's you've crossed that threshold. You can't uncross it. I could come up with cliches all day long, my friend. But it's has any of these remote viewers ever said to you, I wish I could undo this. I wish I could go back and undo everything and not see what I've seen?
I think, the case with Ingo where he went to the moon, that type of thing. Seems like he was not happy about that target. Joe McMoneagle, he talks in the documentary about hating UFO targets because it's so hard to prove. And there's so much of a stigma surrounding them. Like, people judge you as being crazy talking about this stuff, even today in 2025, when the government themselves have admitted there's got to be some truth to this. So you look at Paul H. Smith, also hates UFO targets. You know, he says it's hard to prove there's a galactic federation if you can't actually show that to the public, right? So what's the meaning of using that as a target in an exercise, right?
Right.
So I think for some people, putting the genie back in the bottle has been harder. That's been their experience with practicing this. And with others, it's just the stigma and the lack of public evidence sometimes in terms of going after these targets.
I tell you what, we'll take our break here. When we come back, let's talk a little bit about, we'll go back in time a little bit, talk a little bit about how this was used in the Cold War, how it was developed, and then we'll go forward a little bit. Let's talk about, you mentioned how it's still being used now. I want to talk a little bit about how it's being used now, and let's talk about how it could potentially be used in the future. And I want to talk about maybe how it could be used in true crime, like how we could use it to solve crimes. I mean, why is it not being used, like, say, by the FBI? Why are we not using it to find bodies? I don't know why we're not using it in more practical means. We'll put it that way. My guest is Darcy Weir. It's a great movie, folks. I want you to go check it out. We have a link in the description of this program. It's called The Psychic Phenomenon. And I encourage you to, again, either rent it or buy it. It's available in both forms on Amazon Prime, on Prime Video. And folks, again, it's got some great guests too. I also will ask Darcy about how he ran across Thomas Jane, who I don't know if he's your favorite Punisher, but he's one of mine. So we'll talk about Thomas Jane when we come back. I'm curious. He's an interesting one to have gotten into the paranormal. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about Thomas Jane too with Darcy when we come back. The Psychic Phenomena. Darcy Weir is our guest. When we come back, more about this phenomenon known as remote viewing. When we come back here on the Best in Paranormal Podcasting, this is Darkness Radio. Welcome back to the Best in Paranormal Podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. My guest is filmmaker Darcy Weir. The name of the movie is The Psychic Phenomena. It's available right now on Amazon Prime and Prime Video, either to rent or buy. And again, I encourage you to go get the movie. We have a link in the description of this program. Darcy, before the break, you know what? I want to start it off this way. You know, we had talked at the beginning of the program. I told you I'd watched two movies. I'd watched yours, and then I had watched An Honest Liar, the James Randi movie. And I'm going to ask you kind of an odd question, and that's this. Randi was influenced by magicians. And in that, he saw the wonder of magic. And then as he got into magic, he saw how easy of a con it was to con people. Mm-hmm. In that, he saw the power of the con, okay, as he put it. Then he realized how powerful it was to put one over on people. And he realized there was a power there. And in that, he could either use it for good or bad. And he realized he had to pull that power back, okay? In that, he saw, as he put it, and this is his words, not mine, he saw that there were charlatans out there that were claiming they had these psychic or healing abilities, or in his words, he definitely went after Uri Geller. Hard at that. We all know that. And as he did this, he wanted to prove that these powers were false. He wanted to take up Houdini's cause, for lack of a better term. And he wanted to prove to the world that this was nothing but woo-woo. It was false, and he wanted to expose all of this. And he went at it with a cynical passion. And he did it because he felt like he needed to protect the world. He took up a cynical cause, and he did it with a fervor. So that's his origin story. I want to get to your origin story. What was it that made you see this, that made you see this psychic phenomenon, that made you see remote viewing, the psychic mind, these powers, these amazing abilities, that made you see this power that even the government saw and decided we're going to exploit this, and made you say, you know what, I want to take it and put it on film and present it to the world and say, look at what we're doing with this?
Yeah. So great question, and great example of, James Randi's work. And I appreciate his work. I've seen An Honest Liar, and I really like the history of his life, and, breaking wide open the fact that there are hoaxes and there are charlatans, because there are.
Yes.
In every field known in history,
yes,
there are hoaxers and liars. In science, religion, politics, ufology, the psychic phenomenon, you're going to have people that take advantage of others. That's just the way it goes. I don't disagree with that. I speak out about hoaxes and frauds all the time in terms of like ufology and stuff. I believe that this is a real issue. And I think what James Randi did in his documentary is he went after people like channelers who commonly just do a triangle hand formation and say that they're speaking on behalf of an alien out there or something like that. He went after people that were basically doing magic tricks, but presenting it as telekinesis. Mm-hmm. He went after one of the most famous guys. What's the Israeli guy's name again?
Uri Geller.
Uri Geller, mm-hmm. who again was doing sleight of hand tricks and cerebral sort of programming techniques to trick people into believing that they're seeing something supernatural that he was doing. So look, that I didn't cover Uri Geller in the documentary because I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
And I reached out to him, but I never really got any word back. I think that there's truth to hoaxes and frauds, but there's also truth to a reality that this stuff was used as an intelligence and military tool for many decades. The inception of it was in 1972. And around that time, Russell Targ had finished building a laser for NASA, very high-powered laser. He was looking to start this project into psychic abilities, and he had created actually a little machine that was geared around showing if somebody had a psychic ability or not for NASA. And you can actually find that machine at the an institute out in North Carolina. It's escaped me right now. J.B. Ryan started it up, but they were the guys that did the initial psychic testing in Duke University in the 1940s, J.B. Ryan, which led to Zener cards like X, square, triangle, circle, wavy lines, a star, that type of thing on these cards, and people were to guess what was on the other side of that card, right? Mm-hmm. So essentially, Russ was interested in that phenomenon at an early age. He said that he followed J.B. Ryan's, it's called the Ryan Institute.
Yes.
Just came to me.
Yep.
And Russ was asking NASA for funding to start this up. And it just so happened, and we cover this in the documentary, Apollo 14 astronaut, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, had just gotten back and was looking to do some work for Stanford Research Institute, RSI, or SRI. And since he was going to go work over there, he overheard this conversation between Russ and the NASA administrator at the time and said, look, I'm going to walk over there. I can ask them if they can give funding and maybe bring that project under their roof, and we'll go from there. And so, yes, Stanford Research Institute started the program. It's called Scan It. And essentially, that's where Ingo Swann and people like Pat Price eventually came to and tested out very unique, powerful psychic abilities. And Ingo was the one who coined the word CRV, controlled remote viewing, which is what people are still practicing today. And from there, it got put through military intelligence and later the CIA. It was Gondola Wish in the 1970s, and the overall umbrella program that was acknowledged in 1990 was the Stargate program. And all of those went under that, identified under that. Basically, the idea is, let's say you have a high-powered satellite mm-hmm. or a high-powered spy plane mm-hmm. that has great optics on the bottom of it, and you're flying over enemy territory, and you're taking pictures of something, and you want to know what that is. Well, the unfortunate thing, the limitation, especially back then, 70s, 80s, 90s, you're going to be looking at the top of a roof for a building,
right?
Which doesn't say much. Says there's some kind of activity there. Maybe sometimes you can see silos and get ideas that maybe there's some kind of nuclear reactor being built or, weapons facilities, that type of thing. But what about looking inside that building? What about finding out who's there, what they're doing? That's where you have a psychic come in. Mm-hmm. And that's where people like Pat Price, Ingo Swann were hired by these military and intelligence agencies to look at these types of targets and give more information on them. And that's, I think, the difference between the psychic channelers, the, magicians masquerading as telekinesis practitioners and so on and so forth, that, this famous skeptic was tackling, and a government well-funded scientific exploit to practice and prove psychic abilities used as a military and intelligence tool.
I want to draw a indirect correlation between one of the things that Randy did and the experiments. And I kind of know where you're going to go with it, but I want to do it anyways. Randy set up a direct sabotage of some of those experiments that they tried to do at different universities. Now, there's a difference between a university and a government experiment, but he sent in false players claiming that they were psychic and tried to sabotage psychic experiments. Whereas, of course, the government experiments, there's no way Randy's going to infiltrate the government and try to do that.
Right.
With that being said, though, how do you, and this is, I want your conjecture on this, Darcy. How do you prove, other than getting direct results, how do you prove that someone is truly psychic?
the accuracy of what they're looking at, and they had no inkling or evidence to prove what they were looking at before they were given that target, right? So, with the declassified documentation that came out after the Stargate program was subpoenaed by Russell Targ's son, who's a successful lawyer, you see how that mission or target took place. Again, blank envelope. This person has no previous knowledge about what they're looking at. Let's say it's Pat Price looking at a nuclear and weapons facility over in Russia. The way that he illustrated cranes and all that stuff in terms of this target, it's incredible the accuracy that he had with what later on would be satellite photos from a different vantage point looking at the same location. That's how you can prove that there's something real to this psychic phenomenon. James Randi's sending in, which I think is clever, civilians into a civilian institution, which is a university, to test if their psychic program is bogus or not, is great. Mm-hmm. It's something we need to do to vet things properly. Maybe there was somebody in that program that was highly psychic, but he found people that were not, especially the ones he was sending in there,
Yeah.
So that's the difference.
Okay. The reason I ask is because to me there's a certain threshold. I get someone with an envelope that's got an orange in it, and then someone who's a remote viewer going, I think it's an orange, and being able to nail that. I get the nuclear facility and being able to nail that. There's a certain threshold where they're reaching out and
the accuracy. Yeah.
Right. How do you know that this council of aliens over here and knowing that, the alien targets is the one, and even the remote viewers themselves say, well, it's the alien targets I don't like the most, because how do you prove it? Right.
Yeah.
How do you know?
Yeah. Well, Joe McMoneagle famously remote viewed the Cydonia complex on Mars, which is something that kind of has been fabled in the UFO community for many decades now. Richard C. Hoagland covering this sort of what looks like an old demolished sort of pyramid complex city on a location on the Mars surface. And, Joe had no inkling, no previous knowledge to it, but he was seeing pyramids when he was given the coordinates and the target. He was seeing an ancient civilization, all this stuff that kind of looks what you see in the actual satellite photos that they took, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's speculation, but it's interesting speculation, the alien target stuff. And who knows? If it's real, it totally changes our reality in terms of what's accepted and what's not about the true history of our solar system, for sure.
But then it gives them one thing to chase if we ever do get up there, right? Which is the sleeping chambers. I mean, come on, that's a little intense, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. Are we going to send Elon Musk and the settlers there, and they're going to stumble upon this old ancient technology and, kind of like incubation chamber bodies and stuff like that of an ancient race? That'd be pretty cool.
Pretty cool, but pretty morbid, right? Them in incubation waiting for supposedly us to come back and rescue them, with the idea that, hey, we're not there to rescue you, we're there to settle it. I mean, doesn't that seem backwards?
It is, but it's interesting regardless. I think it would be pretty cool if we find out that all to be true. Yeah,
it would be. I mean, it'd be a heck of a ratification of what the remote viewers had seen. I mean, the fact that we had actually come from there to begin with. I mean, but wouldn't that, okay, so again, playing what if here, Darcy, wouldn't that turn civilization on its ear, don't you think, to learn that we came from there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think what the idea was is that they were kind of like a precursor race that was much taller, more robust, very advanced, but for whatever reason, they went through some cataclysmic event that ruined their opportunity on Mars, and they had to abandon that planet and start over on Earth. Why are we not super tall? Why are we not them? I don't know. Were we genetically modified? Those are the sort of things that people discuss in the UFO community all the time. Like maybe we're some kind of synthesized being, so on and so forth. I have no idea, but it's very interesting regardless. And yeah, it would totally change the paradigm of human history that's been taught to us.
Yeah. Yeah, that it would. That it would. I want to talk about how we apply remote viewing modern day, because you had mentioned that up until this day they're still using remote viewing, and you have whistleblowers out there now, and of course we've got the hearings on Capitol Hill, and you hear whistleblowers still talking about remote viewing in one respect or another. You hear about reports, of course, of we have video, we have other things that are slowly coming out in these hearings. But how is it, to your understanding, how is it being used today?
So controlled remote viewing is still being taught and practiced by people like Paul H. Smith. He teaches Ingo Swann's school and IRVA. Then you've got the Monroe Institute. Joe McMoneagle teaches out of there, and many other remote viewers that are still alive today that are from that sort of legacy, the Stargate program. And from what I hear from people like Paul Smith, he is regularly tasked by intelligence sources or military sources to remote view things with him and his team of psychics. And then when you listen to Russell Targ's explanation of how things went before the program shut down officially in 1991, he talks about how the CIA sent over their own personnel to be trained in remote viewing. And the CIA, once they had those people that were apparently highly psychic based on Russ Targ's explanation of it, trained up fully on how to do everything, they shut down the program. So you can kind of extrapolate from that maybe the CIA took it in-house. Maybe they still do it in-house. And there's a guy named Nelson that is friends with Chris Ramsey. Chris Ramsey did this like docu-series on his whole remote viewing exploration on his channel on YouTube called Area 52 Investigations. And Nelson is this red-bearded, big guy that has won the national memory competition, I think 6 or 7 years in a row. He's really brilliant. And when he was going through that, he finished and he was approached by the CIA. And they said to him, "Would you like to learn how to remote view?" And he said, "Sure." So they brought him over and they trained him up. Why? Obviously, they're still doing this. Yeah. And they're looking for talented people that they believe are psychic to some degree, to continue to use this as a tool for their success in gaining intelligence and information.
Interesting. Which, I guess leads to speculation that, okay, so the CIA is still involved in plenty of ops around the world, but then there's been speculation in the last 5 to 10 years or so that the CIA is probably operating within our borders. I mean, that's been thrown out there. If you read a lot of the stuff on the internet,
100%.
yeah, which means that it's using that same mind tech within our borders too.
Probably.
Which is a little scary.
You actually brought up police enforcement, why they're not using this as a tool, and there is evidence that it was used. I mean, Pat Price was a prolific police commissioner. He was the head of the police force and was able to solve all these crimes, he believes, psychically, really quickly before he went and did all this Stargate program stuff. So you got that. And then you also, I've spoken to psychics that have worked with the police in their areas. The police apparently tapped this as an option to try and find missing people, bodies, all kinds of stuff. And apparently it kind of works. So, I think it's real to some degree. And trying to think of who the person was that recently said that they worked with the police force. She runs a channel called the UNX radio program. Margie K.
Okay.
So she's worked with the police before many times. And then there's an individual in Canada that I spoke with. She's practiced remote viewing for the police to help solve some crimes for a Canadian police organization. So, it seems that this is something that people are interested in using.
I know there are mediums and psychics, quite a few that work with law enforcement and are quite successful with working with law enforcement, especially with the FBI. But they don't say specifically they use remote viewing. I mean, they talk about using mediumistic abilities to do so. Some, right. But I've never heard somebody say specifically, no, I'm not mediumistic. I'm a remote viewer. I actually see the body and then tell them where to go find it.
Well, that's what Margie K told me. And this other individual, which I can bring up her name because she was actually taught at the Monroe Institute on how to remote view. Really? And that's what led her to eventually working with the police. So that's why she identified it as such.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I just think it would be such a great tool and would help. The only thing, and this is the only thing, Darcy, that could stand in the way or get in the way of certain things, is there's certain jurisdiction there or certain laws that might stand in the way, but I could see where you could make exceptions for the rule, obviously.
Totally.
There might be certain things that you could throw things out in court and say, okay, how did you obtain the body? How did you find the body? And that could, a defense attorney could blow holes in certain things in a case in order to, make a defense for a certain person who's arrested and say, well, okay, how exactly did you find the body? How did you know the body was there? How can you tie it to my client? Right.
Yeah, I think everything would have to be speculation at first.
Yes.
We would have to look at each case that they worked on and figure out how they can prove they solved that psychically. Yeah. I totally agree with you on that.
Because a psychic would see it or a remote viewer would see it, but then, of course, you have to tie it with physical evidence, right? You have to tie everything back to the physical in order to convict. So, you may have a remote viewer who says, okay, I see the crime happening, and I see exactly how it happens. But then you also have to have that remote viewer say, okay, there's blood spatter behind the refrigerator. Go back there and collect that trace evidence or that DNA evidence or touch DNA or whatever is back there. This is where you can find this. This is where you can find that. I would just think it would be such a handy tool to use when it comes to solving crimes.
Yeah. And that second person who told me they worked with the police force in Canada, I found her. It's Patricia Mona.
Oh,
And
okay.
she's been doing it since 2014 till present. So maybe you should chat with her, have her on sometime. Patricia Mona, she's the owner of Patricia Mona Intuitive Consulting. And she got her training at the Monroe Institute under one of their highly psychic trainers. You know, Joe McMonagle works out of there and many others.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we'll have to have her on. Most definitely. That's intriguing. Definitely intriguing. Let's switch gears a little bit because I want to bring it back around briefly before we come to the end of the program, and we're getting pretty close here. We're coming to a point as far as aliens go with disclosure, where, you know, of course, we've mentioned the Capitol Hill hearings, and we're getting to a point where you've got politicians like Marco Rubio who are pushing for disclosure. And as a matter of fact, there was a news story this past week where he's talked about the credibility of whistleblowers. Why don't we believe them? Why shouldn't we give them more credibility? And I guess where I want to go with this here, Darcy, is this. We talk about this type of research. We talk about this type of tool with remote viewing. And we talk about being able to reach out, and you talk about this in the movie, being able to reach out and make communication. And you talk about these talented people, Ingo Swann, for example, who's no longer with us. You talk about other people such as Paul Smith who can reach out and make that contact. Is it so much to be able to reach out, make that contact with one of these beings and ask them to come forward and speed up the process of disclosure?
Wow. I don't know why I feel like this is deja vu. I think the last time I was on, you asked me something like this. I think disclosure is different for everybody that's watching this unfold in the public. You've got a huge camp of people that believe disclosure should come from experiencers, people that say they've connected with the non-human intelligence, been abducted, seen a UFO, had a communication from the UFO. That, sort of phenomenon goes right down the line. Then you have people that say, well, we need the government officially to acknowledge there's non-human intelligence and presence here that has been kept secret from the public since forever, right? Since it's been first detected by the militaries and the intelligence community, let's say. I lean towards that because I think it's overall as a mass consciousness and understanding of our reality, it has a net benefit because it changes the way people look at the world and the universe around us. But does that disclosure come from the president? Does it come from, somebody high up in the military that truly knows the history of all this being kept from the public? Or does it come from experiencers alone that have connected with this intelligence like you were just talking about? I think it is all. I think it is everything at once. I think you need to embrace all three levels, and maybe we'll never get a disclosure officially from the president. Right now, they're probably busy trying to make sure the Epstein files don't come out. But you also will get these whistleblowers and people that are coming forward that honestly, in my opinion, some of them have experienced something anomalous and they do know what's going on to some degree. We need that, you know? And then we do need the experiencers, the civilians that have experienced this stuff and um, are not military intelligence or government connected, but they have a unique story that challenges our reality as we know it.
So, Darcy, let me tell me if this is an acceptable disclosure scenario to you, because I don't think at this point the president coming out and saying, "Yeah, we have an agreement with aliens, and they come visit us, and we get technology from them, they take something from us, and we're good." I don't think there's credibility there. So, if I say to you, the Secretary of Defense calls a press conference and says, okay, we're laying it all out on the table. This is the agreement we have with them. Here is the evidence, and plays a short video which shows actual interaction between government officials and a live alien. Do we still go, it's photoshopped, or it's CG? Do you still have skeptics at that point?
Of course you will. And, we should scrutinize stuff like that because there is such a thing as a psyop, as the military and the intelligence community carrying out psychological operations on the public to control, to create all kinds of awareness about things that are useful to their own motivations, right? I do believe that, but I guess the net benefit there is that people start to think that we're not alone in the universe and that, maybe we can start to think outside of the box, outside of our planet, outside of our dimension that we live in, which is 3D, and the fourth dimension is time. So we start to think beyond that. And I think there is a net benefit to that, even if that scenario is messed up, is some kind of psyop, or is fake, Mm-hmm. But what if it's real? That would be cool too.
I think, again, it's only speculation on my part. I think the only reason that they haven't come out and announced anything like that is because the only reason there's an agreement with any other race is because it's only for personal gain. I don't think we're getting anything out of it. As a race, right.
You could be right. Humans are greedy.
Yeah.
And maybe they are too. Who knows? I don't know. But it's all speculation. Yeah. I don't know if there's an agreement. That's just a rumor. There's no proof of it. And it's part of that sort of conspiracy history. Here's another idea. What if we are so inferior to whatever is interacting with us that there would never be an agreement? There's no purpose. There's no need. They can do what they want. Unimpeded, so maybe part of the awareness is to announce that so that there's a bit of fear and that, the powers that be can ramp up military spending and all these things are on the table and open to discussion for me.
So let me ask you this then, Darcy. Do you think that maybe they're just trying to sweep everything under the rug and it's just denial everywhere? They're just like, well, there's no such thing as aliens, so that we're placated?
Placated? Yeah. I think that seems to be what they've been doing for decades, and they haven't stopped. Even though you have this Age of Disclosure documentary coming out with James Clapper, a general who's saying that this is real, and all these other military and intelligence people and Congress people that have apparently been read into it. That doesn't mean that the Department of War, Department of Defense, the Department of Energy have to play ball and release anything. They can just deny. say, nothing to see here. Those people in the documentary are crazy. That's all they got to do. And it gets ignored by mainstream. But it's like sort of that civilian citizen movement where enough people see that, they get talking, and maybe that pushes eventually more inquiry from the government to pry this out of the hands of the DOE and the Department of War.
Yeah. There's, you would think if there was an even trade with an alien race, or if there was some sort of agreement with an alien race, we would have things like energy without carbon emissions. We would have things like, technology that would be beneficial to our race, that would make things easier in life. We would have this utopian society by now, but we don't, right?
Yeah, and what was the story about Nikola Tesla building the Wardenclyffe sort of towers, the free energy, unmetered electrical system that could challenge Edison's power lines that were running alternating current across the country? I think JP Morgan said before he shut it down, how do you meter this? How do you make money off of this?
Yep.
And Tesla said, you don't.
Right. Yeah, you don't.
And that was in the 1800s, right? If that's true, that's why we're living this reality now. It's all for greed and a way to run an economy, really.
Yeah.
And there's, capitalism has done well, communism has not. There's all kinds of social experiments that have taken place in this, what we call an economy, and in our cultures around the world, the countries around the world. And I guess like you need a financial system to some degree, but when that impedes or locks you into a paradigm in which you can't break free and disclose certain scientific discoveries that would, make us quantum leap into the future in terms of our consciousness and our abilities to travel the stars and so on and so forth, that's a crime against humanity.
Yeah.
And also you have to burn stuff. It like makes the environment gross.
Yeah.
There is such a thing as pollution and toxicity to the environment. No one wants to live next to a coal plant or, some kind of chemical energy plant. So we're a nuclear power plant.
Yeah, or a dump.
Not great.
Yeah, nobody wants to live next to a toxic dump. I mean, that's life, right? I mean, that's the truth.
So if there's a free energy sort of or cheaper energy, alternative energy that doesn't rely on wind, solar, and tidal forces to generate power for a city, and that's being kept from the public because it's too hard to generate income from it. That's a crime against humanity.
Well, there was the one announcement, and I keep bringing this up, and again, I will slam my fist on the table about this until I hear something more about it. But at the beginning of this year, there was an announcement, and I try to remember who announced it, that they had developed a laser fusion mechanism to power an entire city. But they said it would take 10 years to develop it fully, but that they could power an entire city with a laser fusion mechanism, and they could turn it over in different power plants. That they could develop this mechanism, and they could convert power plants to laser fusion. But
that's amazing.
But then again, it's the JP Morgan conundrum, right? How do you charge for it? Because laser fusion is just light, right? That's all it is.
There you go.
It's just light.
Yeah, but there has to be some kind of like system behind the laser that's giving that power. I remember there was a fusion discovery. I don't know if it's the exact same one, but I think it is. And that was in the UK. And they said, yeah, to make it to scale, it's going to take a long time and money, right? But hey, if money is invested into something that's cleaner, more efficient, and better for the environment, then you can turn around and charge the public for that efficiency and for that cleaner option.
Right.
People will often opt for it, you know?
Yeah.
So I hope they do commercialize it and make it to scale.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, for the sake of, future generations, I really do hope that option's on the table and that it's sped up a lot faster than 10 years from now. I really do. So.
Totally.
Well, the movie is out and available right now, The Psychic Phenomena. It's a great movie. Again, I want you folks to go either rent it or buy it. It's on Amazon Prime right now and Prime Video. Again, you know what? The one thing we forgot to mention, and I want to mention briefly before we leave people here today, Darcy, is Thomas Jane, everyone's favorite Punisher. I got to ask you this question before we leave. I kind of know the story, but I want you to tell people if he gave you any insight into it, what got him into the paranormal, or what got him stoked into the paranormal?
Yeah, we don't have a ton of time, but I will say he's had his own experience when he was younger with his dad. I think he has a book coming out about that, like a UFO sort of encounter, and he's convinced this is real.
Yeah. He's got some amazing insights. Again, I'll leave it for the movie so people can get some of those insights. Incredibly intelligent insights as to psychic phenomena, about the whole remote viewing issue. And again, he's really plugged in as far as the paranormal goes. I think you got a good one when you got him on board with the movie. So
thank you.
Again, Darcy Weir, the guest and the filmmaker of The Psychic Phenomena. Go get it. There's a link in the description of this program. Darcy, I want to thank you so much for being on today.
Thanks for having me, Tim. Always a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine, my friend. Folks, that'll do it for this week. Again, I appreciate you guys both watching and listening to the program. If you're listening to the program on podcast and you're not watching the video, it's real simple. Either go to YouTube, the original Darkness Radio on YouTube, or you can just simply go to darknessradioshow.com. The video and audio all live right there. When you just click on the show name, they're both there, both video and audio on that show name under one easy roof, for lack of a better term, or one easy category. Also, iOS 26 is out now for Apple. Make sure your Apple apps are updated. The Darkness Radio Apple app is updated. Look in your Apple store. Make sure everything is updated there, as everything is updated as far as the Apple app goes for Darkness Radio. Jessica Freeberg has 2 events that are up. Again, look in the description of this program. We'll have a link for Jessica Freeberg's website. She's got an event in December, an event in January that I'll be at. It's a New Year's event. Make sure that you click on Jess's link and get your tickets. Those tickets are going quickly for Jess's event in January, New Year's event. Make sure you join us up at the Palmer House for that event. All right, and we're on the weekend, and of course, lots of stuff going on, fall and winter events going on, and of course, lots of winter cleanup or fall cleanup going into winter going on. I want you to remember, folks, that there are disabled and elderly people out there that need help and need your help. Be a light in someone's darkness this weekend. Go help either a member of your community, a friend, a family member, someone who's disabled or elderly needs your help this weekend. Go be a light in someone's darkness this weekend. Go help somebody. A message from your friends here at Darkness Radio. All right, that'll do it for the weekend, folks. We love you. We appreciate you. Thank you. If you enjoyed the program, like, share, review, give us a 5-star review, and we'll see you right back here next week for the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio.